Welcome to The Mortgage Voice with Jeff Barton, your voice in the mortgage industry. Each week on this program, Jeff and his guests share their expertise, personal anecdotes, and the latest industry news to keep you in the loop. Now, to provide you with insight and help you navigate the consistently changing world of real estate lending, here is your host for The Mortgage Voice, Jeff Barton.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Jeff Barton. I'm your voice in the mortgage industry. 888-713-2929. That's the telephone number. If you pick up the phone and give us a call, we can talk to you about what's going on. And what's going on in the mortgage and real estate world is really kind of changing this fall. We've seen a number of things that would affect real estate prices. Certainly, if anybody's been watching the stock market, it's very volatile. It's up and down, and that makes people nervous. If you've been watching the mortgage market, the rates have been going up steadily. If you're out there shopping for homes, you might have noticed that prices have fallen somewhat, and you were able to negotiate a little bit better with your the person who's trying to sell you the house. So these are the things that are changing in the market. But today I wanted to talk somewhat about the fire that ripped through Southern California and Northern California during the past week to 10 days. I live, obviously, the company that I work for is Malibu Funding, and I work for Malibu Funding, and I live in Malibu, California. So I went through the fire, and to talk about what happens psychologically to people when they go through any of these things. Daryl's been through a fire about, 6-8 months ago, Daryl?
It was the Thomas Fire was in December.
It's in December. And Thomas Fire turned out to be one of the biggest ever, right, in California or in the U.S.?
I think, it was the largest now to date.
Okay, so going through these things, now I know in my listening audience there's certainly fires, certainly the shooting at San Bernardino, certainly a number of other related incidences weather-wise happen. And we in Southern California go through it all the time. And what happens to you psychologically, I'll just quickly tell you the story. The fire came on a Friday, and I had gotten up early that day and went from my house traveling Canaan Doom Road, which is one of the canyon roads that leads to the 101 out in kind of near the Ventura County line, and it's going to Los Angeles. Anyway, the road was closed, so I couldn't get through, and I had to come back home. And I was there trying to figure out what to do and how it was going to work when in fact the fire appeared on the horizon. Now, at the time in the morning, it was 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, 5 to 10 miles away, we saw smoke. And we had the mandatory evacuation notice. Now, let me just tell you about evacuation orders. I know that the two schools of thought. One is to get the heck out quickly as possible. The other school of thought is, well, let's just wait around and see. Okay, well, I had a lot of neighbors that had lived in that neighborhood since they were kids. And the last fire in my particular neighborhood, which was on Point Doom in Malibu, California, was in 1954. So most of my neighbors felt very confident that the actual fire wasn't going to reach our neighborhoods. So the day progressed, and as life would have it, the smoke kept getting larger and larger, and there's this tremendous photo, and I'm sure many people have seen it, that has made the rounds on social media and also some of the news media outlets, which is this huge wall of smoke of different colors and fire, probably 100 to 200 feet high, and it looks ominous. It looks like a huge wave that you would see on some kind of a tsunami. Well, this smoke was now 5 miles from my house, and there were some flames at the bottom of the smoke, and I took a picture, which I tweeted out at that particular time, at Jeff6493. That's my Twitter handle if you want to get in on some of this. Anyway, I sent the picture out, and the caption was fire. That was it, right? I put it on all my social media sites, and in the picture is this very teeny plane flying. Well, if you blew up the picture a little bit, you saw that little tiny flame in this massive smoke wall and fire was actually a large jumbo jet. And just to give you an idea in scale as to how big the fire was, so now it's 5 miles away, and it's 1:30 in the afternoon, and my wife was very upset. So we jumped in the car, and we left. We left town, and we drove very slowly, because all of Malibu at that point had figured out, the fire's coming, let's get out. So we traveled to a friend's house and we stayed in the Pacific Palisades for 24 hours. During that time, we had no idea whether our house had burned down. And if you're in a situation where you're not sure and I know based on whether it's a violent act of a shooter situation, as many people experience it over in San Bernardino or at the Border Grill and Bar recently, which is another story in and of itself. We happen to know some people in that. So this compounded, and then the fire. But when you're in those situations and you're trying to figure out, okay, what do I do? How do I do it? You're best to have a plan, or to be able to just listen, follow, and trust, which is what we did. So we listened to what we were supposed to do. We followed directions, and we trusted that those people who were responsible for whatever we were doing would do their jobs. So for 24 hours, we had no idea whether we had a house or whether we didn't have a house. And a friend of ours' brother decided on that Saturday, to walk to my house. Now, to go up the Coast Highway at that particular time, and maybe you have experienced this, whether it's in snow or, like I say, fires or other things, when the police or the sheriff shut down a road, they shut it down. I mean, there are roadblocks, there's, a huge police presence, you cannot get around it through it. So this neighbor's brother got through somehow. He went around, he swam in the ocean, he climbed a mountain, but he got around 6 or 7 of these, got to my house, and put out fires right around my house in order to save my house. So I really appreciate what Chris did. He's been on the show before, and he did a terrific thing. And I think the story of people helping people who happened to stay was universal. There was no, okay, I'm going to spend time here and not spend time over here. People whose own house was at risk were trying to save the next house in line to be burned down, as opposed to just guarding their house. It was great. That part was absolutely terrific. So when the story got back that our house was okay, I decided on Sunday to go back out to Malibu, where I was Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and you couldn't get out and you couldn't get in. And there was no water, no gas, nothing. And what was a very difficult situation the first few days turned into, okay, I got to eat. My neighbors have to eat. How are we going to do that? So I worked at the local elementary school for a week, handing out food, handing out supplies, trying to keep people fed, happy, talking to people. Just, a situation where you want to chip in and do what you can for people because you were fortunate, or that's just how you were raised, or whatever the situation or reason you do what you do. But in that particular world, that week, people banded together. And during disasters and during times of strife and stress, that's what happens. I know that if you have a death in the family, neighbors bring over something to eat. Why? Because it's just what they do. Well, this was on a scale of, a massive scale, 100-fold, that we were having different places in the city of Malibu and the people there reaching out and helping. And I think that's universal. I think that's universal whether you live in San Bernardino, Riverside counties, whether you're in LA counties, wherever you are. If there's a disaster, you band together. I think putting blame on agencies for not doing enough is ridiculous. This thing was a tornado of fire, and there was no stopping it. So I appreciate everybody, what they call first responders, people who rush to the fire as opposed to rushing away from the fire. And I had buddies in certain neighborhoods, band of 15 of them, my friend's son, his buddies, and about 12 or 13 of them were roving bands putting out fires. Now that was an amazing situation that occurred in order to help people, and these stories that come out and will come out, and I think people need to talk about it. If you're out there and you're thinking, okay, it's a real estate show, why are we talking about this? We'll get to it during some other segments in the show, but I wanted to paint a little bit of a picture as to what was happening there, how it happened, and now, of course, the roads are finally open. They still don't have electric. They still don't have gas. There's a lot of things that they're trying to, 140 power poles burned, hundreds of houses. Yeah, it was a disaster. It still will be a disaster, But, yeah, we'll get to it later on in the show. I'm Jeff Barton. I'm your voice in the mortgage industry, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to The Mortgage Voice with Jeff Barton. We'll be right back with more in just a moment. For more information on today's topic, email Jeff Barton at info@malibufunding.net. Now, back to The Mortgage Voice with your host, Jeff Barton.
Welcome back to the show. I'm Jeff Barton, 888-713-2929. This is The Mortgage Voice, and thanks for tuning in. Once again, each and every week we bring you some information, news about properties and mortgage rates. This week the show is a little bit different. I wasn't here last week because of the fires, both locally here in Malibu, where I live, as well as in Southern California and certainly up in Northern California. And I brought today, very happy to have him on the show, Mikey Pearson, whose recent election has made him one of Malibu's city council people. Mikey, first of all, congratulations about winning the election, but what a first week being, a council person elect.
Well, thank you. Yes, it's been quite a week. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, so tell me about, now you're a lifelong Malibu resident. I've known you for, at least 20, 25 years. I know that both seeing your home under duress, under fire, all the things that happened during that week, and yet you, the person I know you as, is someone who wants to help. How did you manage to, stay focused on the job at hand while you were watching a lot of your hometown burn?
Well, this fire event was sadly part of a cycle that comes around. So to me, it was somewhat predictable.
Mm-hmm.
And so in many ways, I wasn't surprised to see a fire like this. I've been talking about this as a planning commissioner for many years. A fire like this was coming.
Right.
So for me, it's just like everything else in life. It was staying focused during the fire, which, as you know, me and a few people fought the fire in our neighborhood, as there was no firefighters who were able to get there. And then after that, it just, being busy is something that's part of who I am, and helping the community is something that is who I am as well. So I just stayed really busy finding ways to help people, which, in this...
we're talking to Mikey Pearson, who seemed to have a little bit of a connectivity. What's that? Once again, Mikey?
So, a lot of it was...
yeah, we're going to try to get him back here on the show. Yeah, the connection being bad, but Mikey was telling us, being, a longtime resident in Malibu, well, let's try him. Let's try him again if we could. That'd be great. He, had a pull and a tug on him, meaning that he basically had a mind to help people as to who he was and what he was doing as a citizen in the mayor to be. No problem. That's good. So we were speaking just about you being a resident and trying to both help people, and then we got cut off. Yeah.
So I was mainly helping people by discovering whether their home burned down or not.
Right.
And letting them know either way. So that spent a number of days. And that kind of morphed into helping people that couldn't get into Malibu, which turned into me taking care of a lot of chickens for a number of days, too, which was a very interesting experience and actually exhausting, taking care of hundreds of chickens.
Oh, my. Where was that?
There was a bunch of chickens off Canaan Road, and the owner was desperate about them. They're her livelihood.
Right.
And I figured out how to find them, and then who knew that a couple hundred chickens drink a lot of water? And
who knew?
The fire hurt the water service there, so I had to bring water from off-site, and it turned into be quite an ordeal. But, I couldn't let the chickens die. That just couldn't do that.
Tell me about the spirit of the town. In my experience being there for a week helping, I really enjoyed the experience. Obviously, it's a terrible circumstance. What was your feeling about it?
I think mostly the community really pulled together, and I probably let 125 people know their homes burned.
Oh, man.
And generally, just the knowledge of it made them so appreciative and able to move forward. And so many of those people, though they were sad, also you could just hear the love of Malibu in their voice, the love of our town, and I was really frankly shocked that across the board, every single person had nothing but nice things to say. And I'm not sure if all of them will rebuild, but, you know, their spirit and their attitude was notable and impressive, to be honest.
We have a lot of disasters in Southern California. You mentioned it. There's rain coming. Obviously, this year, if we get a lot of rain, it's going to cause problems. What is the city? What do you think the plan's going to be going forward? Do you think there'll be much of a change in terms of either building codes or a necessity of cutback from brush for a while? What are you thinking?
I think that this is that moment we need to look at ourselves and really define who we are in a new reality. And that new reality to me is that these fires are bigger, hotter, and move faster than what we're used to. And if you build in a high fire zone, like most of Malibu is, you really have to think about the kind of home you build and your expectation on who's coming to save you if a fire comes. Because to me, the answer is most likely nobody.
Yeah.
These fires are too big. Well, no one's going to pay the tax money to hire a fire department to be ready for a 10 and 20-year fire. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that if anything, during this time period, those that stayed behind, and I was referring to you on my opening as well as Leo Harrington and his crew over in Point Doom, just doing hotspot fire put out, you know, as a group of citizens with hoses. They did a pretty admirable job, as you did, and I think really relying upon yourself and not expecting, you know, because of the way this particular fire moved, it moved so fast, you can't expect people to, you know, be ready and prepared, or that the city is going to be able to do it. And I think I heard some grumbling, but not a lot. I heard people who were really understanding of the services that they got and were appreciated for it, but didn't expect like full protection during this particular fire.
I think the issue of staying behind, which did save hundreds and hundreds of homes,
right,
or leaving, is going to be a very important discussion in the city, and I think we need to have that discussion. I would personally not tell anyone to stay behind. I would encourage everyone to leave.
Right.
With that said, you know, I've lived in Malibu my whole life. I have fire equipment, I have hoses, I have a water pump, I have all of the gear, the helmets, all of that. And my intent, mine and my son Emmett's intent, was not to be heroes. It was started out to be just to make sure embers didn't catch the neighborhood on fire.
Right.
And as the fire came into the neighborhood, we saw we had a chance to save homes. And so it sort of evolved from that with escape plans and with a lot of forethought. With that said, it's not worth anyone losing their life doing that. So I think it's a very important discussion we have, because if hundreds of people stay behind now because of what I did, that worries me a great deal, because you have to have the preparation, the knowledge, and frankly, the right mindset to even attempt it. You really need to know what you're doing.
On the rebuild, the process of rebuilding, what is the city going to do to either streamline it, make it easier, or to make it tougher?
I think here's what I know right now, and this will evolve. If you rebuild essentially within the same footprint, which means you can increase by 10%.
Right.
If you do that, you do not need a coastal development permit. It is considered a fire rebuild, so you can get expedited a lot faster.
Right.
So that's one thing. Number two, I just discovered that, I don't know the name of the organization, but it's sort of Cal Debris Removal at some state agency.
Right.
Will remove the debris from your house for free. And they do a fantastic job, I'm told. Or you can decide to do it yourself and have to go through the permit process and pay for it.
Oh.
So the word from everyone was that Cal Fire Debris Removal, or whoever they are, does a great job. So that might help people out a lot. So
Great.
There's a number of things happening, including a company will be hired to process those applications in their own office, not going through the normal planning department. That'll help things out, But with that said, I'm sure it's going to be a difficult process.
I know. Hey, Mikey, thank you very much for coming on the show. I do appreciate it. I know you're a busy man over there right now. We've been talking to Mikey Pearson, who is the city council person-elect. And when do you take office? In January?
No, December 10th.
Oh, well, congratulations. I'll be there. And thank you very much for coming on the show. I do appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeff. Always good to talk to you.
Yes, thank you. And I'm Jeff Barton. I'm your voice in the mortgage industry. We'll be right back.
You're listening to The Mortgage Voice with Jeff Barton. We'll be right back with more in just a moment. For more information on today's topic, email Jeff Barton at info@malibufunding.net. Now, back to The Mortgage Voice with your host, Jeff Barton.
Welcome back to the show. I'm Jeff Barton, your voice in the mortgage industry, 888-713-2929. That's the telephone number. If you pick up the phone and give us a call, you're not going to get through right now. We're doing a special show on the fires in Southern California, some of the disasters that have taken place, and people are maybe wondering, why are you talking about this on a real estate show? Well, so many things in Southern California affect our real estate where we live, and because we have to deal with it, we have to deal with it on a number of different levels. One of the guys that I've asked to come on the show today has been on the show before. Joe McDougall is a director in Hollywood, as well as a guy that's been around the industry in Malibu for a number of years, and I asked him to come on the show. First of all, hi, Joe. How are you?
Hey, Jeff. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for coming on the show. Joe and I spent the last week helping people who were in need, giving physical aid as well as comfort and talking. And overall impressions, Joe, of both the experience of being in the fire and then those people who you saw come to receive help.
How long is your show?
10 minutes. Well, I don't know. We can
Well, let me put my AD hat on and try and
Yeah, of course.
compartment, put it all together real quick. Being here and watching it come over the hill, I didn't leave. It was surreal,
Right.
to be honest. It was frightening. It was thrilling, surreal. Truck was packed and pointing out. But where I was, when it did press the hill, I was just south of Pepperdine. So about 5 helicopters dumped it out in 10 minutes. So I wound up staying, which I was glad I was able to do. I was up the next morning at about 9. That was Saturday morning. This was Saturday morning at 3:30, watching it in the morning crest the hill, and then I was up about 9 and headed up to the point to check on people's homes who weren't there and didn't know. I didn't have a problem really accessing it because it was so fresh, so new. But went through that, saw some neighbors. Got through to some neighbors to let them know their homes were okay. Wound up, going to where we spent the week, to the Marine Science School on the point, and which was a relief center, and receiving stuff and organizing that and distilling stuff and hugging and understanding and crying together and sharing together. Really a natural disaster that we always hear, you see it, but you don't know what it's like until you do it. And it's not uncommon, obviously, in Southern California. I've been here over 35 years, and in Malibu over 15. But having said that, we'd see them get close to Malibu, but rarely did they, or if ever, jump the PCH. And this time it did. I mean, as a photographer and filmmaker, I stood on my balcony and shot it coming down the hill.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Joe, about that. Being an artist as well, a photographer, you mentioned earlier that it was somewhat thrilling or exciting, and mixed in with the rest of the emotions, and using whatever emotion to take the pictures. Have you seen them? What do they look like? Looking back at them, how do you feel?
The first time I looked at them, they all looked the same, really. And to shoot, I was first kind of in shock and dismay. I had my camera, but I, as an artist or as a human being, I guess you sometimes have to take it in personally and with your own eye and not through the camera. But as a photographer, exciting. That was part of being in a place and experiencing an experience that you don't always do. You don't. I can drive down the Skid Row and shoot the homeless in downtown LA, and as heartbreaking and frightening at times that can be, there was nothing like this. So personal. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I agree with your assessment. Being personal, I know that in talking to you before I came back on Sunday, or just getting a text about the condition of the house was quite a relief. How many people were you able to tell that their house was okay, and did you have to tell some people that their house wasn't okay?
I was so afraid of that, and I couldn't tell you how many I knew that I was able to, go down the list. I just made my way across the point, stopping at every house I knew.
Right.
From Eamon to Corey to Mark Daly and Hugh and Mary and Paul, and letting Dan, my wife, know that the old house was still standing. And people knew or saw that I was here and would reach out to their friends. I, wound up going up to Broad Beach a couple of times for someone I didn't even know, but we had mutual friends, and she had let them know that I was there, and reached out. I was able to check on her parents that, were elderly. And you hear, they're on Broad Beach, what's the problem? That's multi-million-dollar homes, but they were old, and there's no power and no service. And,
right.
Just delivering a case of water and being able to get back in touch with their daughter was, a relief and very humbling.
The emotional effect of this. How are you feeling personally? How are you feeling?
I'm feeling okay. It's only when I start kind of rewinding it and taking it in. When you're in the middle of it, you don't stop and think. You mentioned I'm a first assistant director, which is responsible for organizing and executing and making sure it's done the right way and the safe way. And it was that came in handy. Trying to organize people going into the Shell station from every direction possible, and it was a total cluster.
Yeah.
But you calmly kind of help people understand that we could be here all day, or you guys need to do this, and you guys need to do that, and everybody will get through, and they'll get gas, and it'll be a lot easier and a lot more calmer. And I don't know if it's a voice of reason that sometimes people just need to hear.
Right.
Guidance or direction.
Yeah, I noticed at any time there's any kind of problem in Malibu or anywhere, and certainly during this fire, people seem to lose perspective when they drive. It's just as if all the rules are out the window, and it's chaos. And it's unbelievable. I don't know why that is, but it is.
Yeah. Well, they're not, people, most people, certainly that live in Malibu, they're used to a particular lifestyle and a daily routine, and it doesn't matter whether you're in Malibu or Venice or
West
Hollywood or North Hollywood. I mean, people get used to their own routines, and no sitting down listening to someone or watching it on the news. They will go through their mind just like I have or you might on what we would do or how we would handle it. But when it's real, it's in your face. And when it's a matter of life and death for some, or losing their homes and all their belongings, I went through on Sunday, I was able to pick up my camera. I went back to the school, but really focus on shooting. And I went down and deep, and I came upon people sifting through the ashes.
Yeah.
One kid was looking for his dad's Olympic medals.
Oh, man. Yeah,
and
I do.
Coming up with asking me, do you think this might have been one? And it was the size of a quarter, and it was a mixture of gold and silver. And I'm like, it very well might be. I would hope it is. But, having his father going through dementia, even explaining, just imagine what he's going through. The
right.
son having to go through these things and not being able to communicate or understand whether his father would understand what was going on, or even wanting to protect him, as vulnerable as everyone is. I mean, that was the biggest thing. You asked how we dealt with the community.
Yeah.
Everybody, it didn't matter how big your house was, or
right.
or what kind of car you drove, or what kind of jeans you had on. There were, you lose it and it's gone. I encountered a news team that wasn't, I didn't feel being quite appropriate or sensitive, and
No, I know. You told them. I know. We shared that story, and that's one of those things whereby sometimes you got to speak up, especially when things need to be said. Hey, this is inappropriate. You guys really shouldn't be manufacturing news when real news is, right in front of you. You don't need to do that.
Yeah. I was kind of like that. Yeah, we don't need to be exploited, and not right now. It's a little. Yeah. It's a little hard. So.
Hey, Joe, I'm going to circle back to you in a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, to see a little bit of a postmortem. I do appreciate you coming on the show. Really, really appreciate it. I know. I
appreciate the opportunity to speak to you about it and share it. I think it's really important that we're all able to do that.
Yep, I agree.
Not broadcast it necessarily, but in order to talk about it and put your guards down and open your hearts and your ears. That's most important, and I think that's what most people are doing today.
I agree. Thanks, Joe. Thanks very much. Right, this is Joe McDougall. He's first AD here in Hollywood, resident up in Malibu. I'm Jeff Barton. I'm your voice in the mortgage industry, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to The Mortgage Voice with Jeff Barton. We'll be right back with more in just a moment. For more information on today's topic, email Jeff Barton at info@malibufunding.net. Now, back to The Mortgage Voice with your host, Jeff Barton.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Jeff Barton. I'm your voice in the mortgage industry, 888-713-2929. That's our telephone number. Pick up the phone and give us a call. Write down the phone number. Call us later. Anything you do here on the show, and today we've been talking fire disaster, my personal experience. A couple of guests that came on the show to talk about what happens, what they did, how they internalize it, the personal application of an event like that, a disaster event. And we have so many in Southern California. I think last year, if we added it up, both Northern and Southern California, there's probably been a half dozen to 10 major disasters, whether it's a fire or a flood or a mass shooting. We in Thousand Oaks over here in Ventura County, I knew some of the people who were shot at the Border Bar and Grill. I've never been to the place myself, but we did know, a couple of the kids and one of the guys, and it's, at that time when I heard that particular event had taken place, it rocked me, because I think so much of what we do in either media or social media or the news, or we just don't internalize it, because it really doesn't affect us. I mean, if some tsunami wipes out 500,000 people across the world, I feel bad as a human being. I wish it didn't happen. You pray for these individuals and you want them not to have to suffer, but does it affect me personally? Well, an event like the one here, and I'm not asking for like special, consideration, or that this is somehow more worthy of empathy than some other situation, but when it happens close to home, or when it happens to you, it rocks your boat. Now, I know the people out there in San Bernardino who went through the shooting there about a year and a half ago. Yeah, and the tangential relationships that you have with the people who knew people, or the people who worked at the buildings, it affects you, and it affects you in such a way that you're not quite sure for a while about how to proceed. I'm experiencing that myself. I know a lot of people based who have gone through the Malibu fire or the mass shooting over here at the grill. They face a lot of the same things, and your need to want to do something is so great, but you're really not sure what to do. So that's why I wanted Mikey to come on, who was the councilperson select for Malibu, and Joe McDougall, who is a first assistant AD in Hollywood, because they could personalize it for you and maybe explain how they're dealing with it, still dealing with it. I mean, one in an official capacity and one in a humanistic capacity, people who are able to reach out, wanting to do something. I think in any disaster, any kind of event, I've been through a number of personal situations, as everybody has. Hey, let's face it, you live long enough, you're going to experience a lot. So things that happen, loss, death, tragic things that go on in your life, you deal with it by doing. And I think a lot of what we did try to do in that situation last week and during the fire was to do what you could do 1 second at a time. And I think what gets lost in our vastness here in Southern California is the connection to other people when you do that. When you're like trying to help, or you're handing out a cup of coffee, or you're talking to somebody, or you're, picking up a hose, or, whatever you're doing during that tragic or disaster-like situation, you are really doing something, but you're also reaching other people who are watching, and you're connecting in a way that you just don't normally do in your car. Last night, a silly story, but so the Coast Highway in California, in Los Angeles currently, is just a mess, right? It has been for a week. There's been closures, and you can't go here, and you have to get into one lane here, and they're checking IDs here, and this goes for 30, 35 miles up the coast from, let's say, Santa Monica, California, up to Oxnard, California. It's been a mess. So last night, happened to be at my sister-in-law's house because my own particular neighborhood is burned down, except, of course, for my house. Don't ask me why. I have no idea, and I'm not a person to argue with anybody who does have the answer. So if you're out there thinking, I know why, good. I believe you, terrific. But we're going to eat, and my sister lives down the coast away from that, my sister-in-law, and she's got electric and power and everything, so we're fine. So we're driving down there, and we had to make a U-turn because we missed the exit for where we had to go, and everybody does. I mean, if you're in any traffic anywhere in Southern California and you got to make a left turn, forget it. But if you got to make a U-turn into traffic, oh, you're asking for it. So last night, traffic on the Coast Highway is backed up, and I mean maybe 5 to 10 miles. It's just wall-to-wall lights. And at 5 o'clock, as everyone knows, it's dark. 5:30, it's pitch. So we're trying to make this left-hand turn, U-turn, because we had missed our exit. And, there's an opening, and anybody who's been in any traffic knows that if you got an opening, you better go, because you may be sitting at that light, and then you got the person behind you blaring a horn. So I made the left-hand turn. Now, I'm still pretty shell-shocked from the fire, the situation of trying to get through it, all of it, being isolated, being alone, without electric, water, blah, blah, blah. So this guy behind me, who I had just, gotten in front of, and albeit he's 30 feet from me, he leans on the horn, and he's driving a big... Why is it that everybody who leans on a horn behind me is driving the largest Suburban I've ever seen? Well, this thing barrels in on me within, inches. I stopped the car. I rolled down the window, and I gave him a look like, really? You got to be kidding me. You mean all of 8 feet, which you would have made up by me not being there, you're in 9 miles of traffic. What? Anyway, we lose the connection to people so quickly in our cars. I do it too. I'm not blaming the guy. You cut him off. I mean, let's face it, that's what happens. But in this situation, based on the fires, the disasters, I would have liked to have stretched that real connection to people just a little bit longer. just to have a little bit more humanity in me, just to slow down a little bit more, to appreciate a little bit more. And I'm not Pollyannish about it. I'm not one to say, hey, the whole world should be a happy, lovely place. Let's all rent Mary Poppins or go see the new Mary Poppins movie. That's not me. I'm as real as the next guy and always anxious to get to my next appointment. But what I really appreciated during my entire week there and going through the experience, evacuating with my wife, coming back into town, going back to the house, helping people, all that, was the connection to the people who were just next to you, trying to make it to the next moment, the next day, the next meal. That was nice. And I don't get that a lot here in Southern California. Now, maybe in modern life, you don't get that. Maybe with social media, you don't get that. Maybe with, the advent of everything that pushes you away from the person who is either you're trying to connect to, even social media, whether it's Facebook or Snapchat or Instagram or LinkedIn or any number of other sites. It just, you think you're connected, but you're really not connected. I mean, you're really not. You have to spend time with people in a situation which pits your primal needs against the obstacles in front of you before you really understand the truth of what that relationship and connection is. Now, we all have it. I mean, we all say that we don't, right? We all say, okay, right, I'm in my car, in my, $50,000 car. I'm driving home to my $400,000 house. I've got my kids in a, $25,000 a year school. Things are looking pretty good, and I'm making $300,000 a year at my job, and everything's great. But that connection, I'm just telling you, having gone through it, is one of the best things I've experienced in my time here, and it took this disaster to go through it. People at their heart during times of need are really great. Now, I have to preface that with, yes, there were 3 to 5 not great people who took advantage of the situation by hoarding, by, trying to get free stuff. And I didn't care about any of that. I'm thinking, look, if this is what you got to do to live, it's fine with me. I don't really care. Whether it's food, whether it's batteries, whether it's toothbrushes, or the millions of items that you're going to need on a daily basis that you don't even realize you need. But for overall, and I hope that connection lasts, and I often seek it. Anyway, I'm Jeff Barton. I'm your host of The Mortgage Voice, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to The Mortgage Voice with Jeff Barton. We'll be right back with more in just a moment. For more information on today's topic, email Jeff Barton at info@malibufunding.net. Now, back to The Mortgage Voice with your host, Jeff Barton.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Jeff Barton. I'm your voice in the mortgage industry, 888-713-2929. Pick up the phone, give us a call, write down the phone number, call us later. We've been talking about the fires, disasters, some personal experiences, as well as some of the city officials, one city official from the city of Malibu, and trying to relate it to what happens in weather situations. We talked about it on the show many times. What happens to properties, property values? What's the rebuild process like? How is it that you're going to try to, fix your own particular property, especially if some damage is done, but it's not a total loss? All of these things are impactful, especially in a market like Southern California, where these things kind of happen all the time. What's the next big event up on the calendar is rain and mudslides. That's always a unwelcome event, especially after fires, and hopefully this year will be gentle on us in terms of that, but I don't suppose it will. We'll probably see a lot of rain, and we'll probably see a lot of road closures and other events that happen in those burn areas that are affected because of the upcoming rain or the rain through the rainy season. I know that back in the late 90s, it poured like I've never seen it pour, either in 98 or I think it was 97 or 98, and it was after a particular fire that happened in 93 in the city of Malibu, and it happened elsewhere, but that's my personal experience there. And because of the rains and because the vegetation had yet to take hold, in 97 the rain came and washed an entire hillside across the Coast Highway, and that Coast Highway was closed, I think, for 6 months before they dug it out and re-engineered the whole thing. So if you're out there and it is raining at any point near a fire burnout area, you got to really pay attention, because you're probably aware of it, but I'll just explain the geology in Southern California has it that there can be a lot of loose shale on top of clay. And when the water hits the clay, because of the weight on top of it, which is saturated with water, it just slides. And the whole, mountain slide area or wherever it is that does slide, it has to slide, because you're now dealing with weight and clay and water, and all those things don't mix that well. So be careful when you're driving around, especially in any of the rain areas. I think that this particular season of fires is probably over, but you never know. As I said, I have family and property of my family's up in Los Olivos, which only 3 years ago burned, I don't know, thousands and thousands of acres up in that particular area. And that's off the 154 above Santa Barbara. And of course, the fires out in San Bernardino and Riverside counties, always in the St. Angeles National Forest region. I mean, it's just one of these things that we really have to pay attention to, both fire and in the mudslides when the rains come. And bringing us to January, when we have our annual earthquake alert, because it seems to be that when it's hot, dry, and January, our earthquake danger seems to go up. And the earthquake that happened, what was the last earthquake? The one down in that broke the 10. The Whittier, was it the Whittier quake or the Northridge? I think it was Northridge.
Northridge was the last one.
Yeah, was it 92, 93, 91? I think it was 91.
Right around there.
Yeah, 91. Anyway, that occurred in January. So in Southern California, people ask me all the time, why do you live there? Look at all these things that happen. Well, when you live here and when you get here, it's beautiful. A lot of people have deep roots here, whether it stretches from here or to other states or south of the border. Deep, deep roots in Southern California. They're not going anywhere.
No hurricanes, no tornadoes.
No, and then no snow, at least where I am. Most of the snow's up in the mountains.
None here either.
Yeah, no, none here either. Okay, how does it affect your property? How does it affect your property value? What is going to happen as a result of fire, water, or some kind of other natural disaster? Talked about it many times on the show. First thing you have to worry about, obviously, if you're in the affected area or if your house, and you just, as the city official from Malibu, Mikey Pearson, said, if you decide not to build or rebuild, you can obviously take the insurance money and sell your property and be done with it. If you decide to rebuild, parameters around which to have the property rebuilt are changing, and because of the nature of the way this particular fire went through my particular city, I'm sure that the building and safety department are going to have new regulations, new restrictions, and new ways by which they want you to build in order to protect you and the properties around you. So, scarcity of housing. Yes, there's 1,500 homes in the Southern California area that burned, and those people in Northern California in the city of Paradise, unbelievable, right, Daryl?
I mean, the whole city was wiped out.
10,000 homes. Think about that.
Gone.
A city of 25, 26,000, 10,000 homes burned.
Right, and over 1,000 people still unspoken for. Yeah,
it's just, I can't imagine how those people recover. How do they recover?
Well, you can't.
You can't.
You can't. It's a life changer.
It's unbelievable. It truly is. And again,
for some of us, a bump in the road down here, for up there, it's a life changer.
Well, you went through a fire, like we said, 6 months ago, right?
Yeah, December. Yeah,
right, exactly.
The Thomas Fire. It started in Santa Paula and ended up in Montecito. That's 60 miles between those two places.
Right,
60 miles.
60 miles of burn.
Yeah,
and the disruption. Do you still think about it?
Oh, absolutely, because we watched it burn within 10 houses here. We watched it burn down the hillside.
Daryl's house is next to a hillside which rises probably 200, 300 feet straight up.
We never saw a helicopter. We never saw an airplane.
Right.
We never saw an ambulance, fire truck, or police car.
It's truly unbelievable. And this particular area, which I think is a great area, I love there. You're less than 3 miles, 4 miles to the beach. You're, in a nice, calm, residential area, and yet You're on your own.
Yeah, we got the beach a couple miles away and Ojai just up the street. And
Yeah, you evacuated over to the fairgrounds, right?
yeah,
The
just
Turk
for
on
a short period of time. We went there and there was no water, no food, no information, so we didn't stay too long.
No, doesn't
And
sound like it.
no place to sleep.
Awful. I think we try to caution people. I try to prepare myself, but some things you're not prepared for. And I'll be honest with you, I looked at the stuff at my house when the fire was cresting over the hill, and I said, I don't need anything. Let's go.
Yeah, well, I mean, you don't really realize that we didn't have any gas in the cars.
Right.
And the power's off to 270,000 homes, including gas stations.
Right. That's
So
right.
we weren't going anywhere even if we wanted to.
Right. And how quickly this neighborhood, which is houses very close together,
Yeah.
very much like paradise.
And the wood house next door,
Right. That thing is
that's a matchstick.
That's a matchbox. That's a whole lot of matches. I've seen that house. And so I don't know. We're just sort of reminiscing and talking about the fires, the disasters, the personal thoughts about that and how you experience it.
But plus, the double whammy was the shooting at Borderline
Yeah.
in the fact
Yeah.
that, they say Thousand Oaks is the safest city in the world almost, and then all of a sudden you have this. That's got to affect people's thought process.
It hangs
As
with
far
me.
as making decisions
It just,
of
there is no
of
safe.
where to live and what to do.
Yeah, I just, because it can happen anywhere, shoot, we have gotten so used to it at schools, at bars, at
There's been 3 more since,
Yeah,
and that was last week.
right. I mean,
Chicago and Denver since.
I just hope that this is a wave that ends, kind of like the plane hijackings back in the 70s. They just all of a sudden don't happen anymore. Now, they've improved safety. They've done a lot to, prevent that sort of thing. Hopefully we can get somewhere where everyone agrees, hey, this is not what we're going to do.
They
Let's
just
not do it.
Made it much more difficult.
They made it much more difficult. Anyway, thanks, Daryl, for jumping in. I do appreciate it. And if you're out there right now and you're wondering about the value of your home and you're in a neighborhood that has been affected either by fires or the rainstorms or some other natural, call a realtor. And I don't mean that flippantly because I'm in the business. I mean, realtors will give you an honest evaluation of your property just because that's the job they do. You don't go on Zillow because Zillow is going to give you an overestimation and they're going to want you to use Zillow realtors and they're going to want you to use Zillow services. I'm just saying the local realtors in your neighborhood will go through the comps and be able to tell you what your house is worth, especially if there's damage to properties, your property or the property next door due to some, extraneous event, some weather-related or disaster-related event. Anyway, I'm Jeff Barton. Thanks for listening to the show. I will be here next week, and this is The Mortgage Voice. See you next time.
You're listening to The Mortgage Voice with Jeff Barton. For more on today's topic, visit www.malibufunding.net.